The crack of a pistol shot echoed through the saloon, silencing the raucous laughter and tinkling piano notes as Zara Dawkins pressed her back against the wall, her heart hammering against her corset. It wasn't the first time a drunk cowboy had fired his gun into the ceiling of the Gilded Lily, and it surely wouldn't be the last in Jordan Valley, Oregon, 1885. "Another round for everyone," shouted Emmett Holloway, the wealthiest cattle baron in the county and the man whose wandering hands had plagued Zara since she'd started working at the saloon 3 years ago. At 32, she had spent 14 years serving whiskey and dodging propositions, watching youth slip through her fingers like sand. "Zara, darlin'," Emmett called, his voice slurring, "bring that pretty face over here and pour me another." With practiced grace, Zara fixed a smile on her face, grabbed a bottle of whiskey, and made her way through the crowd. Men parted before her, some tipping their hats, others letting their eyes linger on the low neckline of her emerald dress. "Coming right up, Mr. Holloway," she said, her voice sweet as honey despite the bitterness she felt inside. She poured the amber liquid into his glass, careful to keep distance between them. "Why don't you sit with me a while?" Emmett's meaty hand closed around her wrist. "I'm feeling mighty generous tonight. I'm afraid Mr. Thornton needs me at the bar," she replied, gently but firmly extracting herself from his grip. "Perhaps another time." As she retreated, she caught sight of an unfamiliar face at the bar, a tall man with broad shoulders, dusty from the trail. Unlike most newcomers who immediately sought out the gambling tables or the girls, this stranger was quietly nursing a single drink, his keen eyes observing the room with a watchfulness that spoke of caution rather than curiosity. Bernard Thornton, the saloon owner, nudged her as she returned behind the bar. "New fella's been asking about work, says he's looking to settle." Zara glanced at the stranger again. His face was partially shadowed by his hat, but she could make out a strong jaw dusted with stubble and eyes the color of a summer storm. "We don't need another bartender," she replied, wiping down the counter. "Not for the saloon, he's a rancher by trade. Bought the old Jenkins place sight unseen, if you can believe it." The Jenkins place had been abandoned for nearly 2 years after old man Jenkins died with no heirs to claim it. The land was good, but the house was falling apart, and the barn wasn't much better. "Fool's errand," she muttered, though something about the stranger's determined posture suggested he was anything but a fool. As the night wore on, the saloon grew rowdier. Zara delivered drinks, deflected advances, and kept an eye on the younger girls who worked the floor. At 20, Ruby was new and still naive about the ways of men, while Lillian at 25 had grown as hardened as Zara herself. Near midnight, as Zara was tallying the evening's receipts, a commotion broke out at Emmett Holloway's table. He had cornered Ruby against the wall, his hand sliding up her skirt despite her protests. "Mr. Holloway, please," Ruby pleaded, her face flushed with embarrassment. Zara was moving before she could think better of it, crossing the room in swift strides. "Mr. Holloway," she said firmly, "Ruby is needed elsewhere." Emmett's face darkened. "I paid good money for her company. For her company, yes, not for liberties she hasn't agreed to." A tense silence fell over the nearby tables. Emmett Holloway wasn't a man accustomed to being denied, especially not by a saloon girl. "You forget your place, Zara," he growled, releasing Ruby only to grab Zara's arm. "Perhaps you need a reminder of what you are." His fingers dug painfully into her flesh, and Zara braced herself for what would come next, a scene she had endured before. But before Emmett could make good on his threat, a large hand clasped his shoulder. "The lady asked you to stop," said the stranger, his voice low and steady without a hint of fear. Emmett turned, surprise momentarily replacing anger. "This ain't your business, cowboy. I'm making it my business." The stranger didn't raise his voice, but there was steel in his tone. "A man who can't respect a woman's wishes isn't much of a man at all." Zara held her breath. No one challenged Emmett Holloway, not in Jordan Valley. Emmett released her and turned to face the newcomer fully. "Do you know who I am?" "Don't much care," replied the stranger. "All I know is that these ladies deserve better than what you're offering." For a moment, Zara thought Emmett might draw his pistol. His hand hovered near his holster, but the stranger didn't flinch. He stood his ground, calm and ready, and something in his demeanor must have given Emmett pause. "This ain't over," Emmett spat, before tossing some coins on the table and storming out, his cronies following close behind. As the door swung shut, the saloon erupted in murmurs. Zara released the breath she'd been holding and turned to the stranger. "Thank you," she said, "but that was foolish." "Emmett Holloway has a long memory and a short temper," the man shrugged. "Never could abide a bully." He extended his hand. "Zeke Xavier, madam, just bought the Jenkins place." "Zara Dawkins," she replied, taking his hand briefly. It was calloused and warm. "And this is Ruby." Ruby bobbed a curtsy. "Thank you, Mr. Xavier." Zeke tipped his hat. "No thanks needed. I should be on my way. Got an early start tomorrow, putting that place to rights." As he turned to leave, Zara found herself speaking before she could think better of it. "Mr. Xavier, wait. Let me at least offer you a drink on the house." He paused, considering her with those storm-gray eyes. "Just one," he agreed, following her back to the bar. Zara poured him a measure of the good whiskey they kept for special customers. "You're new to town, buying the Jenkins place." "That's ambitious." "I like a challenge," he said, accepting the drink with a nod of thanks. "Been moving from ranch to ranch since I was 16, working other men's land. Time I built something of my own. Alone, for now." He took a sip, appreciating the quality. "Though I'll need to hire help once I get the place running." Zara studied him openly now. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 35 or so, with lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of years under the sun. There was a steadiness to him, a self-possession she rarely saw in the men who frequented the saloon. "What brings you to Jordan Valley specifically?" she asked. "Heard it was good cattle country with fair water rights, and land prices that won't bankrupt a man starting out." He glanced around the saloon. "Though I'm gathering there might be some local politics I wasn't aware of," Zara laughed without humor. "That's one way of putting it. Emmett Holloway owns half the valley and thinks he owns the other half too, including the people. And you, what's your story?" The directness of his question caught her off guard. Most men didn't care about her story, only about what she could offer them for the night. "Not much to tell," she replied, falling back on the practiced ease of deflection. "I serve drinks, I keep the books, I look after the girls." Zeke's eyes didn't waver. "That's what you do, not who you are." Something in his gaze made her want to tell the truth. "I came west after my parents died. I was 18, had an uncle in Sacramento who'd offered me a place to stay. When I arrived, I found he'd passed too. No money, no connections. A saloon was willing to hire me, and here I am 14 years later. Not what you dreamed of as a girl, I'd wager." Zara tensed. "We don't all get what we dream of, Mr. Xavier." "No," he agreed, finishing his drink, "but it's never too late to dream something new." He stood, placing his hat back on his head. "Thank you for the drink, Miss Dawkins. I imagine I'll be seeing you around town." As he walked out, Zara found herself watching his retreating back longer than was proper. There was something different about Zeke Xavier, something that had stirred a feeling she thought long dead hope. The following morning, Zara woke before dawn, as was her habit. The saloon rooms above were quiet, the girls and customers still sleeping off the previous night's excesses. She dressed simply in a high-necked blue dress, her working clothes for handling the saloon's accounts and supplies before opening time. As she made coffee in the small kitchen at the back of the saloon, Bernard Thornton entered, already looking harried despite the early hour. "That new fellow caused quite a stir last night," he said, helping himself to coffee. "Emmett was out of line," Zara replied. Bernard sighed. "Emmett pays more than any other customer. We can't afford to lose his business. And we can't afford to let him assault the girls either." Zara's voice was firm. "Ruby is barely 20. She came here for honest work." Bernard snorted. "Honest work in a saloon. The girl's naive, and so are you if you think that's possible." "It should be possible," Zara insisted. "We're not a brothel, Bernard." "No, but expectations are what they are." He rubbed his balding head. "Just keep the peace with Emmett when he returns. Apologize if you must." Zara bit back a retort. Bernard wasn't a bad man, merely a practical one. The Gilded Lily was his livelihood, and Emmett Holloway's patronage meant the difference between profit and loss some months. "I need to go to the mercantile," she said instead. "We're low on coffee and sugar, and the new shipment of whiskey should be in." Bernard waved her off. "Take care of it then, and Zara." He hesitated. "You did right by Ruby, just be careful. Holloway's not a man to cross lightly." The morning air was crisp as Zara walked down the main street of Jordan Valley. The town was small but growing, with a church, school, mercantile, bank, and several smaller businesses serving the surrounding ranches. At this early hour, only a few people were about the baker opening his shop, a stable hand leading horses to water, and Mrs. Peterson sweeping the boardwalk in front of her boarding house. The mercantile was already open, Mr. Weber sorting through a new shipment behind the counter. "Morning, Zara," he greeted her. "Your order came in yesterday afternoon. I've got it all boxed up ready." "Thank you, Mr. Weber," she replied, setting her basket on the counter. "I'll also need coffee, sugar, and do you have any of those hard candies left? The girls are partial to them." As Mr. Weber gathered her items, the bell above the door jingled and Zeke Xavier walked in. He looked even more imposing in daylight, his shoulders filling his clean shirt, his hat pushed back to reveal tousled dark hair. He nodded to Zara. "Miss Dawkins," he said, his voice as steady as it had been the night before. "Mr. Xavier, early start as promised, I see." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Sun doesn't wait for a man to be ready." Mr. Weber looked between them with interest. "You must be the fellow who bought the Jenkins place. Heard about that. Brave undertaking." "It needs work," Zeke acknowledged, "but the bones are good." "I've got your seed order here and the tools you wanted. Plow blades on back order, though. Might be a week or two." Zeke nodded. "I appreciate it. I'll also need lumber for repairs, nails, and if you've got any chickens for sale, I'd be interested." "Mrs. Finch has chickens," Zara found herself saying. "Her place is just north of town. She'd be glad of the business since her husband passed." Zeke looked at her with that direct gaze. "Thank you for the tip." Mr. Weber finished gathering Zara's items. "That'll be $2.45, Miss Dawkins." As Zara opened her purse, a commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window, they could see several of Emmett Holloway's men surrounding a wagon driven by a Chinese man who was attempting to deliver vegetables to the hotel restaurant. "Get your foreign goods out of our town," one of Holloway's men was saying, his hand resting menacingly on his gun. The Chinese man, who Zara recognized as Lin Wei from the small farming community outside town, was trying to explain that he had an arrangement with the hotel's cook. Without a word, Zeke strode out the door, leaving his purchases behind. Zara followed, concern overriding caution. "Is there a problem here, gentlemen?" Zeke asked, his tone conversational but his stance alert. One of Holloway's men, Jed Parsons, known for his quick temper, turned with a scowl. "None of your business, stranger. This Chinaman needs to understand he's not welcome here." "Seems to me the hotel wants his vegetables," Zeke observed, nodding to the crates of fresh produce in the wagon. "And last I checked, this was a free country where a man can conduct honest business." Lin Wei looked between them anxiously. "I go now, no trouble." "You stay right where you are," Zeke told him firmly. "Your business with the hotel is legitimate." Jed stepped closer to Zeke. "Holloway doesn't like foreigners taking business from Americans, and after last night he especially doesn't like you." "That's a shame," Zeke replied calmly, "because I don't particularly care what Holloway likes or doesn't like. Now step aside and let this man deliver his goods." Tension crackled in the air. Zara held her breath, aware that several townspeople had stopped to watch the confrontation. The sheriff was nowhere to be seen, probably because Sheriff Davis had long been in Holloway's pocket. "You're making a mistake," Jed warned, his hand hovering near his holster. "No," came a new voice. "You are." Zara turned to see Mrs. Peterson approaching, her broom still in hand. "Those vegetables are for my boarding house as well as the hotel. Mr. Lin has been supplying us for 2 years with the finest produce in the county. If you have a problem with that, Mr. Parsons, you can take it up with me and the 12 miners who board with me, all of whom enjoy Mr. Lin's vegetables with their supper." Jed hesitated. "Mrs. Peterson was well respected in town, and the miners who stayed at her boarding house were a rough lot who wouldn't take kindly to their landlady being upset. "Holloway won't be happy," Jed muttered, but he stepped back, gesturing for his companions to do the same. Once they had moved on, Lin Y bowed slightly to Mrs. Peterson and then to Zeke. "Thank you, very kind." "Just doing what's right," Zeke replied. "Don't let them intimidate you." As Lin drove his wagon toward the hotel, Zara found herself standing beside Zeke on the boardwalk. "That's twice in less than a day you've stood up to Holloway's men. You're either very brave or very foolish." "Perhaps both," he admitted with a slight smile. "Where I come from, you stand for what's right or you might as well lie down in the dirt." "And where is that?" she asked, curiosity getting the better of her. "Colorado originally. My father had a small ranch there until the drought took it. After that, we moved around Wyoming, Montana, even up to the Dakota Territory for a spell." His eyes grew distant with memory. "Learned ranching from the ground up." "And your family, gone now. Father passed 5 years ago, mother before that, no siblings." He looked at her. "What about you? Any family left?" Zara shook her head. "None that I know of. The Saloon girls are the closest thing I have to family these days." They walked back into the mercantile together, where Mr. Weber was tactfully pretending he hadn't been watching the whole scene through his window. "Your total comes to $17.60, Mr. Xavier," he said, tallying up the extensive list of supplies. Zeke paid without comment, though Zara knew that was a significant sum for a man just starting out. As they both gathered their purchases, Zeke turned to her. "Miss Dawkins, I could use some local knowledge. Is there anyone in town who might be willing to help with repairs? I can pay fair wages, but I can't rebuild the entire place alone." Zara considered. "Tom Miller's boys are good workers. Their farm doesn't need them full-time this season. And there's Joaquin Ray's. He was a carpenter before he hurt his leg. Can't climb scaffolding anymore, but his hands are still skilled. I'd be grateful for an introduction when you have time," Zeke said, lifting his heavy crate of supplies. "I have some free hours this afternoon," Zara found herself offering. "The saloon doesn't open until 4. Surprise and something warmer flickered in Zeke's eyes. "I'd appreciate that. Shall I come by around 1? "I'll be ready," she replied, wondering why her heart had quickened at the prospect of spending time with this stranger who seemed to upend the established order of Jordan Valley with every action. As they parted ways outside the mercantile, Zara couldn't help but glance back at Zeke's retreating figure. For the first time in years, something had changed in the monotonous pattern of her days, and that something was 6 feet tall with storm-gray eyes and an unflinching sense of justice. True to his word, Zeke arrived at the saloon precisely at 1 o'clock. Zara was waiting outside, having changed into a simpler dress of dove gray with a shawl against the afternoon breeze. She had taken extra care with her appearance, pinning her chestnut hair in a neat coil at the nape of her neck. Zeke drove a sturdy wagon pulled by 2 well-kept horses. He jumped down to help her up, his hand strong and steady as she climbed onto the wooden seat. "I thought we might visit Tom Miller first," Zara suggested as they set off. "His place is closest to town." They rode in companionable silence for a while, the wagon creaking along the rutted road that led out of Jordan Valley proper and into the surrounding farmlands. Spring was just taking hold, with wildflowers dotting the meadows and new leaves unfurling on the trees. "How long have you worked at the Gilded Lily?" Zeke asked eventually. 10 years in Jordan Valley," Zara replied. 4 years in Sacramento before that. That's a long time to stay in one place if you're not happy there." His perception startled her. "What makes you think I'm not happy?" Zeke kept his eyes on the road. "Something in your eyes when you look around the saloon, like you're seeing a cage rather than a home." Zara fell silent, unnerved by how easily he had read what she thought she had kept hidden. "It's steady work," she said finally. "Not many options for a woman alone. What would you do? If you could choose anything," the question caught her off guard. It had been so long since she'd allowed herself to dream of alternatives that the answer didn't come immediately. "I'd like a place of my own," she said slowly. "Not necessarily grand, just Mine, perhaps a small boarding house or a cafe, somewhere respectable where I could still make use of my skills but without. She trailed off. Without men assuming they're purchasing more than just your service, Zeke finished for her. Zara nodded, grateful he understood without her having to explain further. That seems like a worthy dream, he said. Why haven't you pursued it? Money, she answered simply. Starting a business requires capital. I save what I can, but… She shrugged. The cost of living rises and unexpected expenses arise. Each year, the goal seems to recede further into the distance. They turned down a narrower track that led to the Miller farm. Ahead, they could see fields freshly plowed and a modest farmhouse with smoke rising from the chimney. For what it's worth, Zeke said as he brought the wagon to a halt, I think you'd make a fine businesswoman. You have a sharp mind and you care about people. That's a rare combination. His words warmed her in a way the spring sunshine couldn't match. Before she could respond, the front door of the farmhouse opened, and Tom Miller emerged, wiping his hands on a cloth. Miss Dawkins, he called in greeting. This is an unexpected pleasure. Mr. Miller, Zara replied with a smile. I've brought someone who might have worked for your boys. This is Mr. Xavier, who's just purchased the Jenkins place. Tom's eyebrows rose. The Jenkins place, eh? That's quite an undertaking. Zeke extended his hand. I'm hoping to restore it properly, could use strong backs and willing hands for the effort. The two men shook, sizing each other up with the careful appraisal of those accustomed to judging character quickly. My boys are good workers, Tom said. Matthew's 19 and strong as an ox, Luke's 17 but nearly as big, both know their way around tools. I pay $1 a day plus meals, Zeke offered. Work from sunrise to sunset with breaks, Sundays off, of course. Tom nodded, clearly approving of the fair terms. Let me call the boys, you can talk to them directly. As Tom went to fetch his sons, Zeke turned to Zara. Thank you for this. Making connections in a new place isn't always easy. People in Jordan Valley are generally friendly, Zara replied. It's just… Holloway and his influence, Zeke finished. I'm beginning to understand the dynamic here. Tom returned with two strapping young men, both with their father's sandy hair and open countenance. After introductions, they discussed the work needed at the Jenkins place, repairs to the house roof, rebuilding the barn door, mending fences, and clearing overgrown fields. We can start tomorrow if that suits, Matthew offered eagerly. That would be perfect, Zeke replied. Dawn at the Jenkins place, with an agreement reached, Zeke and Zara took their leave, heading next to Joaquin Reyes's small cabin at the edge of town. The former carpenter was delighted at the prospect of work, his dark eyes lighting up as Zeke described the detailed woodwork needed to restore the house's sagging porch and broken shutters. It will be my pleasure, senor, Joaquin said, his accent still strong though he'd lived in Oregon for 20 years. I bring my tools tomorrow also. By the time they had finished their rounds, including a stop at Mrs. Finch's farm to arrange for the purchase of chickens, the afternoon was waning. Zeke drove the wagon back toward town, the setting sun casting long shadows across the landscape. You've accomplished more in one day than most newcomers do in a week, Zara observed. You have a way with people. I've worked many places, Zeke replied. You learn that respect goes further than money or force, he glanced at her, though I suspect you know that better than most. In my position, you learn to read people quickly. It can be the difference between a pleasant evening and… She let the implication hang in the air. Zeke's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. It's not right how men treat women in your profession, as if your work somehow makes you less deserving of basic decency. The world isn't always fair, Zara said softly, though his indignation on her behalf touched her deeply. No, he agreed, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to make it more so. As they approached the saloon, Zara could see Bernard outside, pacing anxiously. When he spotted the wagon, relief flooded his features, followed quickly by concern. There you are. He called as Zeke brought the horses to a stop. I've been worried sick. Holloway's been in, asking for you specifically. Zara felt a chill despite the evening warmth. What did he want? Wouldn't say, just that he had business to discuss with you. Bernard cast a nervous glance at Zeke. He wasn't pleased to hear you were out with the new rancher. Zeke jumped down from the wagon, then extended his hands to help Zara descend. "Is Holloway still here?" he asked, his voice calm but with an undertone of steel. "No, he left about an hour ago, said he'd be back after sundown." Bernard wrung his hands. "Zara, whatever's between you and Holloway, it might be best to smooth things over, for everyone's sake." Zara straightened her spine. "I've done nothing wrong, Bernard, neither has Mr. Xavier." "Standing up for what's right isn't wrong," Zeke added, "but it can have consequences. Miss Dawkins, perhaps you should take extra precautions tonight." "I'll be fine," she assured him, though uncertainty gnawed at her. Emmett Holloway was not a man to dismiss lightly. "Thank you for the afternoon." It was enlightening. A hint of a smile touched Zeke's lips. "For me as well." He tipped his hat. "I'll bid you good evening then, Mr. Thornton." As Zeke drove away, Bernard turned to Zara with exasperation. "What were you thinking?" "Gallivanting around with a stranger when you know how Holloway feels about you." "Emmett Holloway has no claim on me," Zara replied firmly. "I was helping Mr. Xavier make connections in town, nothing more," Bernard sighed. "Just be careful tonight." Holloway's been drinking already, and he's in one of his moods. Inside the saloon, preparations for the evening were underway. Ruby was polishing glasses while Lillian arranged her hair before a small mirror. Both looked up when Zara entered. "Is it true?" Ruby asked eagerly. "You spent the afternoon with the handsome rancher who stood up to Holloway. Word travels fast," Zara observed dryly. "Yes, I was helping Mr. Xavier find workers for his ranch." Lillian smirked knowingly. "Just business then." "Nothing to do with those broad shoulders or the way he looks at you like you're made of gold." "Don't be ridiculous," Zara replied, though she felt a flush creeping up her neck. "Mr. Xavier is simply a decent man trying to establish himself in a new community." "If you say so," Lillian teased. "But Holloway was fit to be tied when he heard about it. Called you some names I won't repeat." Zara's stomach tightened. "I'll handle Emmett, I always have. This feels different," Ruby said softly. "He's never been so possessive before." Zara wanted to reassure the younger woman, but the truth was that she shared Ruby's unease. Something had shifted in Emmett Holloway's attitude toward her recently, a sense of entitlement that went beyond his usual arrogance. As the evening drew on and the saloon filled with its regular patrons, Zara kept one eye on the door, tension coiling in her stomach each time it swung open. By 10 o'clock, the place was crowded and noisy, but Holloway had yet to appear. Just as Zara was beginning to hope he wouldn't come at all, the door burst open, and Emmett Holloway strode in, flanked by Jed Parsons and 2 other men from his ranch. The conversation dimmed as heads turned toward the newcomers, sensing the charged atmosphere. Emmett's eyes scanned the room until they landed on Zara behind the bar. His lips curved in what might have been a smile, but his eyes remained cold. "There she is," he announced, his voice carrying over the murmurs. "The prettiest girl in Jordan Valley who thinks she's too good for the likes of us regular folk." Zara kept her expression neutral as he approached the bar. "Good evening, Mr. Holloway. What can I get you?" "A bottle of your best whiskey," he replied, tossing a gold coin onto the counter. "And a private word with you, my dear." "I'm afraid I'm quite busy tonight," she said, placing a bottle and glass before him. "Perhaps another time." His hand shot out, gripping her wrist with painful force. "It wasn't a request, Zara." Bernard materialized beside them, his face pale but determined. "Now, Emmett, let's keep things friendly. Zara's working the bar tonight, lots of customers waiting." "Then they can wait a little longer," Emmett growled, not releasing his grip. "Or do I need to remind you who keeps this place in business?" Zara could feel the eyes of everyone in the saloon on them, the tension building like a thunderstorm. She made a swift calculation. Refusing outright would only escalate the situation, potentially endangering others. 5 minutes, she conceded, in the office with the door open. Emmett's grip relaxed slightly, triumph gleaming in his eyes. "Lead the way, darlin'." As she moved from behind the bar, Zara caught Ruby's worried gaze and gave her what she hoped was a reassuring nod. The office was small but visible from parts of the main saloon, a compromise she hoped would keep Holloway's behavior in check. Once inside, Emmett closed the door despite her stipulation, leaning against it with a smug expression. Now, let's talk about your afternoon adventures. I was helping a new resident make connections, Zara replied evenly. Nothing more. That's not how I see it, Emmett countered, taking a step toward her. Seems to me you're getting mighty friendly with a man who disrespected me in my own town. Jordan Valley isn't your town, Emmett. And Mr. Xavier was simply defending Ruby from unwanted advances. Like he's defending you now, Emmett's face hardened. I've been patient, Zara. For years, I've shown you preference, given you gifts, treated you better than the other girls, and how do you repay me? By flaunting yourself with the first stranger who rides into town. Zara stepped back as he advanced, her shoulders bumping against the desk. There's nothing between Mr. Xavier and myself, and your gifts have never entitled you to anything from me. Everything has a price, Emmett snarled, closing the distance between them. I've paid plenty for your attention. Now I'm collecting. His hands gripped her shoulders, and Zara felt a flash of real fear. This wasn't the usual drunken pawing she could deflect with a sharp word or a gentle rebuff. There was calculated intent in Emmett's eyes. Let go of me, she demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. Or what? He taunted. Your new cowboy isn't here to save you. The door suddenly burst open, but it wasn't Zeke Xavier who stood in the doorway. It was Sheriff Davis, his weathered face grim. Everything all right in here? He asked, though his eyes were more wary than concerned. Emmett released Zara immediately, his demeanor shifting to casual indifference. Just a private business discussion, Sheriff, nothing to worry about. Sheriff Davis looked to Zara, a question in his eyes despite his allegiance to Holloway. In that moment, Zara knew she had a choice: speak out and face potential repercussions, or remain silent and allow Holloway's behavior to continue unchallenged. Mr. Holloway was just leaving, she said firmly. Our business is concluded. Emmett's eyes narrowed, but with the sheriff present, he merely nodded. For now, he murmured, low enough that only Zara could hear. We'll finish this conversation another time. As he brushed past the sheriff, Emmett paused. Keep an eye on that new rancher, Davis, Xavier. Something about him doesn't sit right with me. After he had gone, Sheriff Davis lingered in the doorway. You all right, Miss Dawkins? Holloway can be persistent when he wants something. I'm fine, Zara replied, though her hands trembled slightly. Thank you for your concern. The sheriff nodded, hesitating as if he wanted to say more but thought better of it. Just be careful. Holloway's not used to being denied. As he left, Zara sank into the chair behind the desk, her heart still racing. The confrontation had shaken her more than she wanted to admit, not just because of Emmett's aggression, but because of what it represented. For years, she had navigated the precarious position of a saloon girl with dignity and boundaries, but Emmett's behavior threatened to undermine that delicate balance. And now there was Zeke Xavier, a man whose mere presence in town had disrupted the established order and placed her in Holloway's crosshairs. Yet despite the complications his arrival had caused, Zara couldn't bring herself to regret meeting him. There was something about Zeke, his quiet strength, his unwavering principles that awakened feelings she had long suppressed. Taking a deep breath, Zara composed herself and returned to the main saloon. The night was far from over, and she had work to do, regardless of Emmett Holloway's threats or her own confusing emotions about a certain gray-eyed rancher. The following week passed in a whirlwind of activity. Word spread quickly about Zeke Xavier's restoration of the Jenkins place, and despite Emmett Holloway's obvious displeasure, several townsfolk offered assistance or sold him supplies at fair prices. Zara heard regular updates from Matthew and Luke Miller when they stopped by the saloon for a drink after their day's work. Mr. Xavier works alongside us, Matthew told her admiringly. Never seen a rancher who doesn't mind getting his hands dirty. And he knows his business, already planning where to expand the corrals and which fields to seed first. The house is coming along too, Luke added. Mr. Ray's fixed that sagging porch and Mr. Xavier replaced most of the roof himself. Place is starting to look like someone cares for it again. Zara listened with interest. She tried not to make too obvious, aware of Lillian's knowing glances whenever Zeke's name was mentioned. She hadn't seen him since their afternoon together, though she'd caught herself looking for him whenever the saloon door opened. Emmett Holloway had returned to the saloon nightly, watching her with cold eyes but keeping his distance. The unspoken threat in his gaze made Zara increasingly uneasy, but she maintained her professional demeanor, serving drinks and managing the girls with practiced efficiency. On Sunday afternoon, her one day of rest, Zara decided to visit Mrs. Peterson at the boarding house. The older woman had become something of a mentor to Zara over the years, offering guidance and friendship without judgment of her profession. Mrs. Peterson was tending her small kitchen garden when Zara arrived, her gray hair neatly pinned beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "Zara, my dear," she called warmly. "Come help me with these peas. My old knees don't take kindly to all this bending." As they worked side by side, pulling pods from the vines, Mrs. Peterson studied Zara with shrewd eyes. "You're looking tired, child. Is that Holloway still causing trouble?" "Nothing I can't handle," Zara replied automatically. Mrs. Peterson didn't sound convinced. "And what about this new rancher? I hear you've taken quite an interest in his settling in." Zara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I've merely helped him make connections in town. It's difficult being a newcomer." "Indeed." Mrs. Peterson placed another handful of peas in her basket. "He seems a good sort. Stopped by yesterday to ask if any of my boarders might be interested in regular work once his ranch is operational. Spoke to each man with respect, regardless of background. That says something about a person's character." "It does," Zara agreed softly. Mrs. Peterson straightened, wincing slightly at the effort. "Life doesn't always give us second chances, Zara, but when it does, we'd be fools not to recognize them." "What do you mean?" "I mean that I've watched you these past 10 years, trapped in a life that dims your spirit a little more each day. And now I see a spark in your eyes that wasn't there before." The older woman patted Zara's hand. "Just something to consider." Before Zara could respond, the clip-clop of hooves announced a rider approaching. To her surprise, Zeke Xavier himself came into view, guiding his horse along the narrow lane that led to Mrs. Peterson's house. He tipped his hat when he saw them. "Mrs. Peterson, Miss Dawkins, I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," Mrs. Peterson replied with a smile. "We were just finishing up with the peas. What brings you to town on a Sunday?" "Delivering a letter to be posted tomorrow," he explained, dismounting. "And I wanted to thank you again for recommending those miners for work. 2 have already agreed to help with the spring planting." "Glad to hear it," Mrs. Peterson said. "Would you care for some lemonade? It's fresh made." "That's very kind, thank you." As Mrs. Peterson went inside to fetch the drinks, Zara found herself momentarily alone with Zeke. He looked good in the sunlight, his skin bronzed from outdoor work, his shoulders relaxed but still powerful beneath his clean shirt. "How are the repairs coming along?" she asked to break the silence. "Better than expected," he replied. "The Miller boys are hard workers and Joaquin Reyes is a true craftsman. The main house is nearly weathertight now and we've started on the barn." "The Millers speak highly of you," Zara told him. "They're impressed by your willingness to work alongside them." Zeke smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his serious face. "My father always said a man shouldn't ask others to do what he wouldn't do himself. Besides, there's satisfaction in building something with your own hands." "I can imagine," Zara said wistfully. Zeke studied her for a moment. "You should come see the place sometime. It's still rough, but it's taking shape." The invitation caught her off guard. "I wouldn't want to intrude on your work." "It would be a welcome interruption," he assured her. "Perhaps next Sunday, if you're free, I could send the wagon for you." Before Zara could reply, Mrs. Peterson emerged with a tray of lemonade, saving her from having to make an immediate decision. As they sipped the cool drinks in the shade of Mrs. Peterson's porch, the conversation turned to town matters and the upcoming spring festival. "You should attend, Mr. Xavier," Mrs. Peterson urged. "It's a fine way to meet more of your neighbors under pleasant circumstances." "I'd like that," he agreed, "though I'm not much for dancing." "Nonsense," the older woman declared. "Everyone can dance with the right partner." Zara here is quite accomplished. Perhaps she could save you a dance. Zara nearly choked on her lemonade. Mrs. Peterson, but Zeke was smiling again, that warm expression that made her heart beat faster. I'd be honored, Miss Dawkins, if you're willing. Put on the spot, Zara could hardly refuse without seeming rude. One dance, perhaps, she conceded, trying to ignore Mrs. Peterson's satisfied expression. When Zeke took his leave a short time later, the invitation to visit his ranch still hung in the air between them, unaccepted but not rejected. As he mounted his horse, he looked down at Zara with those searching gray eyes. About Sunday, he said quietly. Think about it, the offer stands. After he had ridden away, Mrs. Peterson gave Zara a meaningful look. Second chances, my dear, she said cryptically, gathering up the empty glasses. They don't come along every day. That night, as Zara lay in her small room above the saloon, sleep eluded her. Her mind kept returning to Zeke's invitation and the strange mixture of excitement and apprehension it stirred in her. To visit him alone at his ranch would be improper by most standards, yet she found herself wanting to see what he was building, to understand better the man who had appended her carefully constructed world. More troubling were her feelings about Zeke himself. At 32, Zara had long ago abandoned girlish romanticism. She had seen too much of men's baser instincts, had deflected too many drunken propositions and wandering hands to harbor illusions about love and respect. Yet there was something different about Zeke Xavier, a steadiness, an integrity that set him apart. When he looked at her, she felt seen as a person, not just as an object of desire or a convenient servant. Foolishness, she muttered to herself, punching her pillow into a more comfortable shape. Men were men, after all, and she had learned the hard way not to trust in fairy tales of rescue and redemption. Still, as she finally drifted toward sleep, the image of storm gray eyes and a rare, genuine smile followed her into her dreams. The next morning brought an unexpected development. As Zara was reviewing the saloon's accounts in the quiet hours before opening, Bernard burst in, his face ashen. Zara, you need to see this, he said, thrusting a piece of paper toward her. It was a notice, officially stamped by the town council, declaring that all businesses serving alcohol must now pay an additional monthly fee for a special license, a fee so substantial it would consume most of the Gilded Lily's profits. This is Holloway's doing, Bernard said miserably. He controls half the council. This will ruin us. Zara read the notice again, anger building within her. When is this supposed to take effect? End of the month, less than 3 weeks from now. Bernard sank into a chair. We can't afford this, Zara. We'll have to close. The implications hit her like a physical blow. The Gilded Lily wasn't just Bernard's livelihood, it was hers as well, and Ruby's and Lillian's and the cook's and the piano players. For all its compromises and complexities, the saloon was their home and their means of survival. There must be something we can do, she said, mind racing. Can we appeal to the other council members? Surely they understand this will affect other businesses too. Holloway's got them scared or bought, Bernard replied, and it's not just us. I heard he's pressuring Weber at the Mercantile to stop selling to that Xavier fellow, threatening to take his considerable business elsewhere if Weber doesn't comply. Zara's jaw tightened. This vendetta against Zeke was getting out of hand, affecting innocent people throughout the town. And now it threatened her own precarious security. I'm going to speak with Sheriff Davis, she decided. There must be some legal recourse against this kind of manipulation. Bernard looked doubtful. Davis has always deferred to Holloway. Then I'll speak to Judge Harmon. He at least has some independence. Zara's determination hardened. I won't let Holloway destroy everything we've built without a fight. She spent the morning visiting various town officials, only to encounter polite dismissals or outright avoidance. Judge Harmon was conveniently out of town on circuit, and those council members not directly under Holloway's influence seemed reluctant to get involved. By noon, Zara's frustration had reached its peak. Standing outside the sheriff's office after another fruitless conversation, she was close to tears of anger and helplessness. Miss Dawkins. A familiar voice called. She turned to see Zeke approaching, concern evident in his expression. "Is everything all right?" Before she could stop herself, the whole story came pouring out: the new license fee, Holloway's obvious retribution, the town's unwillingness to stand against him. Zeke listened without interruption, his face growing grimmer with each detail. When she finished, he shook his head. "This isn't right. Holloway can't be allowed to use his influence this way. He's been doing it for years," Zara replied bitterly. "Most people are too afraid or too indebted to him to object." "What about a town meeting?" Zeke suggested. "If enough business owners and citizens speak up together, it would be harder for the council to ignore. Who would organize such a thing? Bernard's too frightened and I'm—" She hesitated. "You're what?" Zeke prompted gently. "I'm just a saloon girl," she finished. "Not exactly someone whose opinions carry weight in proper circles. You're a respected businesswoman who manages the accounts and operations of a key establishment in this town," Zeke corrected firmly. "And you're someone who cares about justice. That should count for something." His faith in her was both touching and unsettling. "Even if we called a meeting, where would we hold it? Holloway would ensure no public venue would be available to us." Zeke considered this. "What about my place? It's outside town limits, beyond Holloway's immediate influence. The house isn't fancy, but it's solid enough now to host a gathering." The offer was unexpected but logical. "You do that, risk further antagonizing Holloway." "He's already targeting me," Zeke pointed out. "And I didn't come to Jordan Valley to bow to a bully. I came to build something, to be part of a community worth belonging to." His eyes held her steadily. "Sometimes that means taking a stand." In that moment, Zara felt something shift inside her, a rekindling of hope, yes, but something more personal too. This man beside her wasn't just offering a venue for a meeting, he was offering alliance, partnership in a cause that mattered to them both. "When could we hold it?" she asked, decision made. "Tomorrow evening," Zeke suggested. "That gives us time to spread the word discreetly, say 7 o'clock. Late enough that most would be finished with their day's work." "I'll speak to the other business owners," Zara agreed. "Those I can trust, and I'll make sure the place is ready." Zeke hesitated, then added, "Be careful, Zara. Holloway won't take this lying down." It was the first time he had used her given name without the formal miss, and the intimacy of it sent a strange flutter through her chest. "I will. You too, Zeke." The rest of the day passed in a blur of quiet conversations and careful planning. Zara spoke with Mr. Weber at the Mercantile, who had also received thinly veiled threats from Holloway. Mrs. Peterson agreed to spread the word among her boarders, many of whom worked for businesses affected by Holloway's schemes. Even Sheriff Davis, when approached cautiously, admitted that the license fee seemed excessive and promised to consider attending, though he made no firm commitment. By evening, as Zara prepared the saloon for opening, a network of whispered invitations had spread throughout Jordan Valley. The response was cautiously positive. Many were eager for a chance to discuss Holloway's increasing control, but had lacked a forum or a catalyst. As she served drinks that night, Zara noticed Jed Parsons at a corner table, watching her with unusual intensity. She wondered if word of the meeting had already reached Holloway's ears. If so, tomorrow's gathering might face more challenges than anticipated. The next day dawned clear and mild, a perfect spring day that belied the tension running through Zara's veins. She went about her morning duties mechanically, her mind occupied with the evening ahead. Around noon, Tom Miller's wagon pulled up outside the saloon. Matthew jumped down, looking around furtively before approaching Zara at the bar. "Mr. Xavier sent me," he said quietly. "Wanted to confirm you'll be at the meeting tonight." "Yes," Zara replied. "Is everything prepared?" "Pa and I helped clear the main room and set up benches. It's not fancy, but it'll serve." Matthew leaned closer. "There's talk in town, though. Holloway's men have been asking questions. And—" He hesitated. "What is it?" Zara prompted. "Jed Parsons was at our place this morning, said if we attended any meeting at Xavier's ranch, we'd find ourselves unwelcome at the cattle auction next month. Pa stood his ground, but others might not be so brave." Zara's heart sank. Holloway was moving faster than expected to quash their resistance. "Thank you for telling me, and for your family's courage." Matthew nodded solemnly. Mr. Xavier said to tell you he'll send the wagon for you at 6:30, said it might be safer than you making your own way out there. After Matthew left, Zara continued her preparations for the evening with renewed determination. If Holloway was already attempting to intimidate potential attendees, it only confirmed the importance of their stand. At 6:30 precisely, Zara heard the rumble of wheels outside. She had changed into her most respectable dress, a high-necked navy blue with minimal adornment, and pinned her hair in a simple but elegant style. Looking in the mirror, she barely recognized the serious, dignified woman who gazed back at her a far cry from the painted smile and low-cut gowns of her saloon persona. To her surprise, it was Zeke himself who drove the wagon, not one of the Miller boys. He jumped down to help her up, his hand warm and steady on hers. "I thought it best to come myself," he explained as they set off. "There's been some trouble today." Matthew mentioned Holloway's intimidation tactics, Zara said. "Has something else happened?" Zeke's jaw tightened. Joaquin Reyes was beaten this afternoon, not badly but enough to send a message. Two of Holloway's men caught him on his way to the ranch and made it clear what would happen if he attended tonight, Zara gasped. "That's outrageous. Is he all right?" Shaken but determined. "He's already at the ranch, helping with final preparations. Said he wasn't going to let bullies in fancy boots dictate his choices." The dirt road stretched before them, winding through green fields and scattered stands of trees. In the distance, Zara could make out the silhouette of what must be the Jenkins place, a two-story farmhouse with a newly repaired roof and a large barn beside it. "It's looking much improved already," she commented. Zeke followed her gaze with evident pride. "It's coming along. Still needs work, but it's starting to feel like home." As they drew closer, Zara could see several wagons and horses already gathered near the house. Despite Holloway's threats, it seemed many had chosen to attend. The interior of the house was simple but clean, with fresh-cut pine boards on the floor and walls that still smelled of sawdust and promise. The main room had been cleared of furniture except for benches arranged in rows and a few chairs at the front. Lanterns hung from hooks on the walls, casting a warm glow over the assembled townsfolk. Zara recognized most of the faces: Mr. Weber and his wife, Tom Miller and his sons, Mrs. Peterson and several of her boarders, Lin Y and two other Chinese farmers, Joaquin Reyes with a darkening bruise on his cheek, and to her surprise, Sheriff Davis standing uncomfortably near the door. Zeke guided her to the front of the room, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. The gesture was protective rather than possessive, and Zara found herself drawing strength from his steady presence. "Thank you all for coming," Zeke began once everyone had settled. "I know it wasn't an easy choice for many of you, given the circumstances. But what's happening in Jordan Valley concerns us all." He outlined the situation clearly: Holloway's increasing control over town affairs, the punitive license fee targeting the saloon, the threats against businesses that dealt with Zeke or opposed Holloway's interests. "This isn't just about me or Miss Dawkins," he emphasized. "It's about what kind of community we want Jordan Valley to be, one ruled by fear and favor, or one where honest work and fair dealing are what matter." Zara then stepped forward, her voice stronger than she expected, as she described the economic impact of Holloway's maneuvers on various businesses. Her years of handling the saloon's accounts had given her a sharp understanding of financial matters, and she presented the facts cogently, without emotion but with clear implications. When she finished, Mr. Weber rose to speak, followed by Tom Miller and others. A pattern emerged from their testimonies: years of subtle, and not so subtle pressure from Holloway, escalating recently into something more aggressive and controlling. Sheriff Davis listened with growing discomfort, shifting from foot to foot near the door. When Joaquin Reyes described his assault, directly implicating Holloway's men, the sheriff finally spoke up. "I can't stand by while citizens are attacked," he said gruffly. "That ain't law and order, no matter who's involved." "What do you propose we do, Sheriff?" Zeke asked. "You've seen tonight that many in town are concerned, but concern without action won't change anything." Davis removed his hat, running a hand through thinning hair. The license fee needs council approval to be enforced. If enough citizens petition against it and if evidence of coercion is presented. He looked pointedly at Joaquin's bruised face. I could take that to Judge Harmon when he returns. He's a stickler for proper procedure, and this fee was pushed through without the usual public notice. Hope stirred in Zara's chest. It wasn't a solution yet, but it was a legitimate path forward, one with legal backing. We could draft the petition tonight, she suggested. Everyone here could sign and perhaps take copies to gather more signatures tomorrow. Agreement rippled through the room. Mr. Weber offered to provide paper and ink from his store, while Mrs. Peterson volunteered to draft the text, drawing on her experience as a former schoolteacher. As the meeting transformed into a working session, with small groups discussing specific grievances to include in the petition, Zeke drew Zara aside. "You were magnificent," he said quietly. "The way you presented the financial impact clear, irrefutable, even the sheriff couldn't dismiss it." Zara felt a flush of pleasure at his praise. "It's just numbers. I've always had a head for them. It's more than that. You understood exactly how to frame the argument to reach different people, the merchants concerned about profit, the farmers worried about fair treatment, the sheriff needing legal grounds to act." His admiration was evident. "That's a rare gift, Zara." Before she could respond, a commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window, Zara could see riders approaching, at least 6 men on horseback, led by none other than Emmett Holloway himself. Sheriff Davis moved to the door, his hand resting on his holstered pistol. "This could get ugly," he warned. Zeke's face hardened. "Everyone stay calm. We're having a peaceful meeting on private property. There's nothing illegal about that." The riders pulled up in front of the house, Holloway dismounting with fluid grace despite his bulk. He was dressed in his finest, a black broadcloth suit and silver brocade vest that gleamed in the lantern light spilling from the doorway. "Quite a gathering you've got here, Xavier," he called, his voice carrying easily in the evening stillness. "Holding church services now, are you?" Zeke stepped onto the porch, his stance relaxed but alert. "Just a neighborly get-together, Holloway. You weren't invited?" Holloway's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Funny thing about that. When half the town disappears to a meeting at your place after you've been stirring up trouble since you arrived, well, a man gets curious." Sheriff Davis moved to stand beside Zeke. "Evening, Emmett. Everything's peaceful here, just citizens discussing town matters." "Town matters." Holloway's eyebrows rose. "Last I checked, Xavier's ranch isn't in town limits. Strange place for town business." "Not when the business concerns intimidation and threats against those who oppose you," Zeke replied evenly. Holloway's facade of amusement slipped, revealing the cold anger beneath. "Big accusations from a man who's been here less than a month. You don't know anything about this community or what it needs." "I know it doesn't need a would-be tyrant using his money to crush anyone who stands in his way," Zeke countered. The two men faced each other, the tension crackling between them like lightning before a storm. Zara moved to the doorway, aware that what happened next could change everything for the town, for the saloon, and for her. "Mr. Holloway," she said clearly, stepping onto the porch. "This meeting is about more than just you or Mr. Xavier. It's about fair treatment for all businesses in Jordan Valley. Surely, as a businessman yourself, you understand the importance of that principle." Holloway's gaze shifted to her, his expression darkening further. "Well, well. If it isn't the saloon girl playing at respectability. Tell me, Zara, does Xavier know what you really are, what you've done to survive all these years?" The cruel insinuation hung in the air, designed to humiliate and undermine. Zara felt her cheeks burn, but she held her ground, refusing to be shamed. "I know exactly who Miss Dawkins is," Zeke said, his voice dangerously quiet. "A woman of intelligence, courage, and principle, which is more than I can say for you, Holloway." "How touching," Holloway sneered. "The righteous rancher and his whore, leading a rebellion." It happened so quickly that Zara barely registered the movement. Zeke lunging forward, his fist connecting with Holloway's jaw in a sickening crack. The larger man staggered backward, shock and rage contorting his features. "Zeke, no." Zara cried as Holloway's men reached for their weapons. Sheriff Davis stepped between them, his own gun drawn. "That's enough. The next man who makes a move spends the night in my jail." For a tense moment, it seemed Holloway might order his men to fire regardless. Blood trickled from his split lip and murder gleamed in his eyes. "This isn't over," he spat, dabbing at his mouth with a handkerchief. "You've made a grave mistake, Xavier, and you too, Davis, taking their side." "I'm not taking sides," the sheriff replied steadily. "I'm upholding the peace. Now, I suggest you and your men ride back to town before this situation deteriorates further." Holloway's gaze swept over the assembled townsfolk who had gathered at the door and windows to witness the confrontation. His eyes narrowed as he registered who was present and who might report back to him later. "Remember this night," he said ominously. "All of you, remember who truly holds power in Jordan Valley." With that, he remounted his horse and, with a gesture to his men, rode away into the gathering darkness. The tension lingered in his wake, heavy as a thundercloud. Sheriff Davis holstered his weapon with a sigh. "That could have gone better." "Or much worse," Zeke replied, flexing his bruised knuckles. "I apologize for losing my temper, Sheriff. He had no right to speak of Miss Dawkins that way." The sheriff's weathered face softened slightly. "No, he didn't, but hitting a man like Holloway," he shook his head. "Just be careful." "Both of you?" As the meeting resumed inside, the atmosphere had changed. Holloway's appearance had frightened some, but galvanized others. The petition took shape with greater urgency, and plans were made to present it to Judge Harmon immediately upon his return in 2 days' time. By the time the gathering dispersed, it was well past midnight. Zara had agreed to stay at Mrs. Peterson's boarding house for the night rather than return to the saloon, where she might encounter Holloway or his men. As the others departed, Zeke drew her aside once more. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for what he said about you and for losing control. I should have handled it differently." Zara looked up at him, struck by the genuine regret in his eyes. Not regret for defending her, she realized, but for potentially making her situation more difficult. "No one has ever stood up for me like that," she said softly. "Not in all my years at the saloon. They've offered money, protection in exchange for favors, but never respect, never defense of my honor without expecting something in return." Zeke's gaze held hers, searching. "Is that what you think, that I expect something in return?" "No," she replied honestly, "and that's what frightens me." "Frightens you? People like me don't get second chances, Zeke. We don't get to reinvent ourselves or dream of something better. We survive as best we can with what life has given us." Her voice caught. "To hope for more is a luxury I've never been able to afford." Zeke took her hand gently, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "Maybe it's time to reconsider what's possible," he said, "for all of us." The tenderness in his voice nearly undid her composure. Before she could reply, Mrs. Peterson called from her wagon, ready to take Zara to town. "We'll talk more when this is settled," Zeke promised, releasing her hand reluctantly. "Be safe, Zara," as Mrs. Peterson's wagon pulled away. Zara looked back at the man standing on the porch of his half-rebuilt home, his tall figure silhouetted against the lamplight. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a different future, one not defined by the saloon's gaudy lights and compromised dignity, but by honest work and genuine respect. Whether such a future was truly possible remained to be seen. But tonight, at least, she had glimpsed its potential in a petition signed by neighbors standing together, in a sheriff finding his conscience, and in the eyes of a rancher who saw her not for what she had been, but for who she might become. The following morning, Zara awoke to the sounds of Mrs. Peterson preparing breakfast downstairs. For a moment, she luxuriated in the unfamiliar comfort of a clean, quiet room that didn't bear the lingering smells of whiskey and cigar smoke. The boarding house, with its simple furnishings and atmosphere of respectable industry, represented everything the saloon was not. She dressed in the same navy dress from the night before, mentally calculating when she could return to the saloon to retrieve her other clothes without risking an encounter with Holloway. Bernard would be worried about her absence, and there were accounts to manage, supplies to order. Mrs. Peterson greeted her with coffee and fresh biscuits. "You look better this morning," the older woman observed. "A proper night's sleep in proper surroundings does wonders." "It was a kindness to let me stay," Zara replied, sipping the strong coffee gratefully. "Not at all. I've always said you belong in more respectable circumstances." Mrs. Peterson buttered a biscuit with practiced efficiency. "That Xavier fellow seems quite taken with you." Zara nearly choked on her coffee. "Mrs. Peterson, really? Oh, don't play coy with me, child. I've seen how he looks at you and how you look at him when you think no one's noticing." Before Zara could formulate a suitable denial, a knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Peterson rose to answer it, returning moments later with Sheriff Davis, his expression grave. "Miss Dawkins," he said, removing his hat, "I'm afraid there's been some trouble at the saloon." Zara's heart lurched. "What kind of trouble?" "Fire," the sheriff replied grimly. "Started just before dawn. Bernard and the girls are safe, but the building." He shook his head. "It's bad." The world seemed to tilt beneath Zara's feet. The saloon had been her home, her livelihood, her security for 10 years. "How did it start?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Can't say for certain yet," Davis replied cautiously. "But it began in the back storeroom, where there's not much that would catch fire on its own." "Holloway," Zara whispered, her suspicions solidifying into certainty. The sheriff neither confirmed nor denied it. "Bernard asked that you come when you're able. There are decisions to be made." After the sheriff departed, Zara sat in stunned silence, trying to absorb the implications. Even if they could prove Holloway was behind the fire, rebuilding would take money they didn't have. Insurance, if Bernard had maintained it, might cover some costs, but not enough. And in the meantime, they would all be without income or housing. "This changes things," Mrs. Peterson said softly, "but perhaps not entirely for the worse." Zara looked up sharply. "How can you say that? People have lost everything." "Not everything," the older woman countered. "Not their skills, their friendships, or their ability to start fresh. Sometimes destruction clears the way for something new to be built." The words struck a chord in Zara, echoing her own secret yearnings. Still, the immediate crisis demanded attention. "I need to go to Bernard," she said, rising from the table. "The girls will be frightened and there will be practical matters to arrange." Mrs. Peterson nodded. "Use my wagon, and Zara, remember you're not alone in this. Many in town will stand with you now after last night's meeting." The ride to the saloon was brief, but emotionally fraught. As the wagon rounded the bend into the main street, Zara could see the blackened skeleton of what had been the Gilded Lily. The roof had collapsed, and the once gaudy facade was now a charred ruin. A small crowd had gathered, some offering assistance, others merely gawking at the destruction. Bernard sat on a crate across the street, his face ashen. Ruby and Lillian huddled nearby, wrapped in borrowed shawls over their night clothes, their expressions shell-shocked. "Zara!" Ruby cried, rushing to embrace her as she descended from the wagon. "Oh, thank goodness you weren't here. Are you all right?" Zara asked, examining the younger woman for injuries. "All of you?" Bernard nodded wearily. "We got out in time, lost everything else though. How did it start?" Zara asked, though she kept her voice low. "I heard something in the storeroom," Bernard replied. "Thought it might be rats. By the time I got down to check, the whole back wall was in flames. Barely had time to wake the girls and get out." Lillian's face was harder than usual, anger replacing her customary sardonic expression. "It was Holloway," she said flatly. "Everyone knows it, even if no one will say it." Sheriff Davis approached, having completed his inspection of the remains. "Can't prove anything yet," he said, though his tone suggested he shared their suspicions. "But I've sent a telegram to Judge Harmon, asking him to return immediately. Between this and Ray's beating, there's enough to warrant an investigation." "An investigation won't rebuild the saloon," Bernard said bitterly. "Or house my girls or replace our livelihoods." Before anyone could respond, the sound of approaching hoofbeats drew their attention. Zeke Xavier rode into town, his expression darkening as he took in the scene. He dismounted quickly, striding toward them with purpose. "I just heard," he said, his eyes finding Zara's immediately. "Is everyone safe?" "Physically, yes," she replied, "but we've lost everything." Zeke's jaw tightened. "This was deliberate." So it seems, Sheriff Davis agreed. But proving it? The timing is hardly coincidental, Zeke pointed out. The night after a meeting opposing Holloway's tactics, the saloon burns down. He's sending a message. A message that worked, Bernard interjected. I'm done. Even if we could rebuild, I won't risk my life or the girls again. Holloway's won this round. Zara stared at her employer in shock. Bernard, you can't just give up. I'm 63 years old, Zara. Too old to start over, too old to fight men like Holloway. Bernard's shoulders sagged with defeat. I've got a cousin in Sacramento who'll take me in. The girls are young enough to find other positions. And what about me? Zara asked, a cold realization settling in her stomach. At 32, she was caught in an unfortunate middle, too old to easily find new work as a saloon girl elsewhere, yet tainted by the profession in ways that would make respectable employment difficult to secure. Bernard couldn't meet her eyes. You're smart, Zara, smarter than any of us. You'll land on your feet. The platitude stung more than outright abandonment might have. After 10 years of loyal service, of managing his books and protecting his interests, Bernard was cutting her loose without a second thought. I see, she said, her voice hollow. Well, I wish you luck in Sacramento. An awkward silence fell, broken finally by Sheriff Davis clearing his throat. There's the matter of temporary accommodations, he said. Mrs. Peterson has offered room for 2 at her boarding house. I'll take Ruby, Lillian said immediately. She's too young to fend for herself. I've got a friend in Portland who runs a millinery, might be willing to take us both on. And I've got a spare room at my place, Zeke offered, looking directly at Zara. It's not fancy, but it's clean and private. The offer hung in the air, loaded with implications. Staying unchaperoned at a bachelor's ranch would be scandalous under normal circumstances, but these were hardly normal circumstances, and Zara found herself beyond caring about conventional propriety. That's very generous, she said carefully. But I wouldn't want to impose. It's not an imposition, Zeke replied, and it's only temporary until you decide what's next. No obligations, no expectations, just a safe place to gather your thoughts. Sheriff Davis studied them both, then gave a slight nod. Given the circumstances, I'd say safety takes precedence over appearances, and Xavier's place is well outside Holloway's immediate reach. It was settled then. Zara would gather what little had been salvaged from the fire, mainly documents Bernard had kept in a metal lockbox, and accompany Zeke back to his ranch that afternoon. Ruby and Lillian would go with Mrs. Peterson, while Bernard would stay with the blacksmith, an old friend, until he could arrange passage to Sacramento. As the practical arrangements were made, Zara found herself functioning on instinct, her mind still struggling to process the abrupt destruction of her carefully ordered existence. Everything she had owned, her clothes, her small collection of books, the modest savings she kept hidden in her room, all gone in a single night of vindictive fire. Yet beneath the shock and loss, something else stirred, a strange, unexpected sense of liberation. The saloon had been both haven and prison, offering security while limiting her possibilities. Now those limitations had been burned away, leaving only uncertainty and possibility. As she climbed onto Zeke's wagon later that afternoon, the few salvaged items packed in a borrowed valise, Zara cast one last glance at the ruins of the Gilded Lily. Smoke still rose from the blackened timbers, carrying away the last physical traces of her life as a saloon girl. Ready? Zeke asked quietly beside her. Zara took a deep breath. Yes, she replied, surprising herself with the firmness of her tone. I believe I am. The journey to Zeke's ranch passed in companionable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. As they crested the final hill, the Jenkins place, now Xavier's ranch, came into view in the golden afternoon light. Zara could see now what had been obscured by darkness the previous night, the true scope of the transformation Zeke had already achieved. The house, though simple, had been meticulously repaired, with a fresh coat of whitewash giving it a clean, welcoming appearance. The sagging porch had been rebuilt, its roof supported by sturdy new posts. Near the barn, a chicken coop housed the birds from Mrs. Finch and beyond it, a vegetable garden had been freshly tilled, ready for planting. "You've accomplished so much in such a short time," Zara observed. Zeke glanced at her, a hint of pride in his expression. "Hard work and good help make all the difference. The Millers, Joaquin, the miners' misses. Peterson recommended they've all contributed. It's becoming a real home," she said softly. "That's the idea." Zeke guided the wagon to a stop before the house. "It's not much compared to what you're used to in town." "It's lovely," Zara interrupted sincerely. "And after today, I'm not sure what I'm used to anymore." Zeke helped her down from the wagon, then carried her valise inside. The interior was as thoughtfully restored as the exterior, simple furnishings arranged with an eye for function rather than show, but clean and well made. "The spare room is upstairs, first door on the right," Zeke explained. "Baths at the end of the hall, kitchen and pantry are through there." He gestured toward the back of the house. "I usually eat around sundown, but with everything that's happened today, I thought we might have an early supper." "I could help cook," Zara offered. "It's the least I can do." Zeke smiled, that rare, genuine expression that transformed his serious face. "I'd like that. It's been a while since I shared a kitchen with anyone." As they worked side by side preparing a simple meal of beans, corn bread, and dried apple pie, Zara found herself relaxing for the first time since hearing of the fire. There was something soothing about the domestic routine, chopping, stirring, the rhythm of cooperation in a shared task. "You mentioned once that you wanted your own place," Zeke said as they sat down to eat. "A cafe or boarding house. Is that still what you'd want if you could choose freely?" Zara considered the question, finding it both easier and harder to answer now that her future was a blank page. "Yes, I think so. Something that's truly mine, where I can set the terms and build something lasting." "That's not so different from what brought me here," Zeke observed. "The desire to build something of my own after years of working for others." "I suppose not," Zara agreed. "Though your chances of success are considerably better than mine." "Why do you say that?" "Be realistic, Zeke. You're a man with skills, resources, and no compromised reputation. I'm a former saloon girl with no capital and limited options." She tried to keep the bitterness from her voice. "You're also intelligent, resourceful, and more knowledgeable about business than most men I've met," Zeke countered. "As for capital," he hesitated, then continued carefully, "there are possibilities you might not have considered, such as partners. Investors who see the value in what you offer." His gray eyes held her steadily. "People who believe in you and what you could build." Zara's heart quickened at the implication. "Are you offering to invest in a hypothetical business venture of mine?" "I'm suggesting that you don't dismiss your dreams so readily," Zeke replied. "Not when there are people who would support them." The conversation shifted to more practical matters: Judge Harmon's expected return, the petition that was still circulating through town, the likely response from Holloway to these developments. "He won't stop," Zara warned. "Not until he's driven you out or established his dominance somehow. That's how he operates." "I'm not easily driven," Zeke replied with quiet confidence. "And from what I saw at the meeting, neither are many others in town. Holloway's mistake may have been pushing too far, too fast." After supper, as darkness fell, they sat on the newly rebuilt porch, watching as stars appeared one by one in the deepening blue of the sky. The silence between them was comfortable, unmarred by the need for unnecessary conversation. "I never thought I'd end up here," Zara said finally. "Not just on your porch, but at this crossroads in my life, everything familiar gone in a single night." "Sometimes the unexpected path leads to better places," Zeke replied. "At least that's been my experience." "And has your path been very unexpected?" Zeke leaned back in his chair, considering. "In some ways, I always knew I wanted my own land, but I never planned to find it in Oregon or to get involved in local politics within weeks of arriving." A smile touched his lips. "And I certainly never expected to find someone like you here." The simple admission hung in the air between them, neither an overt declaration nor a casual observation. Zara felt her pulse quicken, aware that they were approaching territory she had carefully avoided for years. "What do you mean, someone like me?" she asked, needing clarification. Zeke turned to look at her directly, his expression serious. Someone who challenges me, who makes me see things differently, someone with courage and intelligence and a capacity for hope that life hasn't managed to extinguish despite everything. He paused. Someone I think about far more than is probably wise, given the circumstances. Zara's breath caught. No man had ever spoken to her this way with respect and admiration that had nothing to do with her appearance or availability. Zeke, She hesitated, uncertain how to navigate these unfamiliar waters. My life is in chaos. I have no idea what comes next or even where I'll be a month from now. I understand that, he said gently, and I'm not asking for promises or commitments. I just wanted you to know that whatever you decide, whatever path you choose, you have my support and my regard. The restraint in his words touched her deeply. Here was a man who respected her enough to give her space to find her own way, even as he made his interest clear. Thank you, she said softly. That means more than I can say. They sat in silence for a while longer, the night deepening around them before finally retiring to their respective rooms. As Zara prepared for bed in the simple, clean spare room, she found herself contemplating possibilities that would have seemed impossible just days ago: a new business, a fresh start, and perhaps, just perhaps, a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine affection. For the first time in years, she fell asleep not with resignation to her circumstances, but with a tentative hope for what tomorrow might bring. The next 2 days passed in a strange, peaceful interlude. Zara helped around the ranch, applying her organizational skills to Zeke's haphazard accounts and pantry, while he continued the ongoing repairs and preparations for spring planting. They worked comfortably together, establishing a routine that felt surprisingly natural. Word came from town that Judge Harmon had returned and was meeting with Sheriff Davis and others who had signed the petition against Holloway's license fee. The investigation into the Saloon fire was ongoing, but without witnesses willing to directly implicate Holloway or his men, progress was slow. On the third morning, as Zara was hanging laundry in the sunshine, she spotted a rider approaching Sheriff Davis, his expression grimmer than usual. "Miss Dawkins," he greeted her, dismounting stiffly. "Is Xavier about?" "He's in the barn," Zara replied, her stomach tightening with apprehension. "I'll fetch him." When they returned together, the sheriff removed his hat, a gesture that only increased Zara's unease. "What's happened?" Zeke asked directly. "Judge Harmon has reviewed the petition and found the license fee procedurally improper," Davis began. "He's ordered it rescinded." "Holloway's furious, of course, but there's nothing he can do about it legally." "That's good news," Zara said cautiously. "Isn't it?" The sheriff's face remained grave. "There's more. Bernard Thornton left for Sacramento this morning, but before he went, he signed over the deed to the Saloon property. To you, Miss Dawkins." Zara stared at him in disbelief. "To me, but why?" "Said it was the least he could do after your years of service," Davis replied. "And that he was too old to rebuild anyway. The deed's at my office whenever you're ready to claim it." The news was so unexpected that Zara could barely process it. The land the Saloon had stood on was valuable, a prime location on the main street of a growing town. Even with the building destroyed, the property itself represented a significant asset. "There's something else," the sheriff continued. "Holloway's put out word that he's interested in buying the property, offered a sum well above market value according to his banker." Zeke's expression hardened. "Of course he has. He burns down the Saloon, then tries to profit from it by acquiring the land. Can't prove he was behind the fire," Davis reminded them, though his tone suggested his personal beliefs. "But yes, the timing is suspicious. Has Holloway approached Zara directly with this offer?" Zeke asked. "Not yet," the sheriff replied. "But I'd expect him to, now that word's out about the deed transfer. Wanted to give you advance warning." After the sheriff departed, Zara sat on the porch steps, trying to absorb the implications of this new development. "I own land," she said wonderingly. "Actual property in town." "You do," Zeke confirmed, sitting beside her, "and that changes your options considerably." Zara's mind was already racing ahead. "If I sold to Holloway, I'd have enough to start fresh somewhere else." Portland, maybe, or even San Francisco. Is that what you want? Zeke asked carefully. To leave Jordan Valley? I don't know, she admitted. A week ago, I couldn't have imagined leaving. Now, she gestured vaguely, everything's different. Including the fact that there are people here who would miss you, Zeke said quietly. Who would prefer you stayed? Their eyes met, and Zara felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. I need to think, she said finally. Consider all the possibilities. Of course. Zeke stood, giving her space. Take all the time you need. The following day, Zara rode into town with Zeke, intent on examining the deed and assessing the saloon property in person. The burned-out building had already been partially cleared, leaving a charred footprint where the gilded lily had once stood. As she stood contemplating the ruins, a familiar voice called her name. Turning, she saw Emmett Holloway approaching, dressed in his customary finery despite the early hour. Miss Dawkins, he greeted her, tipping his hat with exaggerated courtesy. I've been hoping to speak with you. Zeke moved to stand beside her, his presence a silent statement of support. Mr. Holloway, Zara acknowledged coolly, I imagine this is about the property. Direct as always, Holloway replied with a forced smile. Yes, I'm interested in acquiring this lot. I'm prepared to offer a very generous price, say $3,000. It was indeed generous, nearly double what the property was likely worth. The offer was designed to be too tempting to refuse, especially for someone in Zara's precarious situation. That's substantial, she acknowledged. May I ask what you intend to do with the land? I'm planning to build a hotel, Holloway replied smoothly. Something elegant that will attract a better class of visitor to Jordan Valley. Progress, you understand. And not at all an attempt to erase the site of your opposition, Zeke added, his tone mild but his meaning clear. Holloway's smile tightened. I don't believe I was addressing you, Xavier. Mr. Xavier is my advisor in this matter, Zara interjected firmly. And his point is valid. This property has significance beyond its monetary value. Sentimentality is a luxury, my dear, Holloway countered, especially for someone in your position. $3,000 would give you a fresh start anywhere you choose, perhaps somewhere your history isn't so well known. The veiled reference to her past as a saloon girl was deliberate, a reminder of the limitations she would face if she remained in Jordan Valley. Zara felt a familiar spark of anger at the manipulation, but kept her expression neutral. I'll consider your offer, she said simply, but I won't be rushed into a decision. Holloway's confidence faltered slightly at her composure. Don't consider too long. My offer has an expiration date 1 week from today. After he had departed, Zara and Zeke continued to the sheriff's office, where the deed was officially transferred into her name. The simple document represented a profound shift in her circumstances from employee to property owner, from dependent to independent. What are you thinking? Zeke asked as they left the sheriff's office. I'm thinking that Holloway isn't the only one with plans for that property, Zara replied, a new determination in her voice. $3,000 is tempting, but it's not just about the money, it's about who controls the future of Jordan Valley. Zeke smiled, a glint of pride in his eyes. What do you have in mind? I'm not entirely sure yet, Zara admitted, but I know I don't want to run away and let Holloway win. This town deserves better. Over the next few days, a plan began to take shape. Zara met with Mrs. Peterson, Mr. Weber, and others who had stood against Holloway at the meeting. The idea that emerged was bold but practical, a cooperative venture to rebuild on the saloon property. Not another drinking establishment, but a combination cafe, mercantile, and meeting space that would serve the community's needs without being dependent on Holloway's patronage. It would take investment from multiple parties, Mrs. Peterson pointed out during one discussion at the ranch. No single person has enough capital to challenge Holloway's resources. But together we might, Mr. Weber added. I've always wanted to expand my dry goods business and the location is ideal. And I've had recipes tucked away for years, Mrs. Peterson said with a smile. A proper cafe would be a welcome addition to town. Zara listened, amazed at how quickly her nebulous idea was taking concrete form. And the meeting space could be used for town gatherings, church socials when the weather's bad, even theatrical performances, she suggested. Something that brings people together rather than dividing them. Jordan Valley Community Exchange, Zeke proposed. A place for commerce, conversation, and connection. The name resonated with everyone present. Plans were drawn up, potential investors approached, and by the end of the week, Zara had a solid counter-proposal to present to Holloway when his deadline arrived. The morning of Holloway's ultimatum dawned clear and bright. Zara dressed with particular care in a borrowed dress from Mrs. Peterson, a dignified gray silk that conveyed both femininity and business acumen. Zeke accompanied her to town, his quiet support giving her courage for the confrontation ahead. Holloway was waiting at the bank, his confidence evident in his relaxed posture. "Miss Dawkins," he greeted her, "I trust you've come to accept my generous offer." "Actually, Mr. Holloway, I've come to present a counter-proposal," Zara replied, her voice steady despite her nerves. Holloway's eyebrows rose. "A counter-proposal? I wasn't aware you were in a position to negotiate." "Things change," Zara said simply. "I've formed a partnership with several business owners in town. We're going to rebuild on the property not a saloon, but a community exchange, a place that serves Jordan Valley's needs without catering to any single interest." The surprise on Holloway's face quickly gave way to calculation. "An ambitious plan, but where would you find the capital for such a venture? Your partners are hardly wealthy." "We have enough to begin," Zara replied, "and we have something more valuable than money: the support of the community you've alienated with your heavy-handed tactics." Holloway's expression darkened. "Be careful, Zara, you're stepping into waters deeper than you realize." "On the contrary," she countered. "I understand exactly what I'm doing. I'm choosing to invest in this town's future rather than allowing you to control it, and I'm not alone in that choice." For a moment, genuine uncertainty flickered across Holloway's face. He had expected her to either accept his offer or attempt to negotiate a higher price, not to present an entirely different vision that directly challenged his influence. "You're making a mistake," he said finally. "One you'll regret." "Perhaps," Zara acknowledged, "but it's my mistake to make, my property, my decision." As she turned to leave, Holloway called after her, "This isn't over, Zara. There are many ways to ensure a business fails before it even opens." Zeke, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, now stepped forward. "And there are many witnesses to that threat, Holloway, Judge Harmon among them." He nodded toward the window, where the judge could be seen observing from across the street. Holloway's face flushed with anger, but he said nothing more as Zara and Zeke departed. Outside, they were met by Judge Harmon, a tall, austere man with penetrating eyes and a reputation for scrupulous fairness. "Miss Dawkins," he greeted her, "I understand congratulations are in order. Sheriff Davis informed me of your plans for the property." "Thank you, Your Honor," Zara replied, "though we have a long road ahead." "Indeed." The judge glanced back at the bank, where Holloway could be seen speaking animatedly with the banker. "Mr. Holloway is not accustomed to opposition. He may make that road more difficult than necessary." "We're prepared for that possibility," Zeke assured him. Judge Harmon nodded thoughtfully. "Good, and know that the law, properly applied, does not favor wealth over justice. Remember that should difficulties arise." As they walked back toward the burned-out property, now the site of their future enterprise, Zara felt a curious mixture of exhilaration and trepidation. She had just declined $3,000 and made an enemy of the most powerful man in the county, all for a dream that might never fully materialize. "Having second thoughts?" Zeke asked perceptively. "Not second thoughts exactly," Zara replied. "More like realistic concerns. What if we can't raise enough money? What if Holloway finds ways to sabotage our efforts? What if the town isn't ready for what we're proposing?" "All valid questions," Zeke acknowledged. "But consider the alternative. Would you have been satisfied taking Holloway's money and leaving? Starting fresh somewhere else, but knowing you'd surrendered to intimidation?" Zara thought about it honestly. "No," she admitted finally. "I wouldn't have been satisfied, but this path isn't just risky for me, it affects everyone who's joined the venture." "They've made their choice," Zeke reminded her. Just as you have, and speaking of choices. He hesitated, then continued more carefully, there's something I've been wanting to ask you. They had reached the property now, standing amidst the cleared debris where reconstruction would soon begin. Zara turned to face him, curious about his suddenly serious tone. What is it, these past 2 weeks, with you staying at the ranch? Zeke began, his usual confidence giving way to a touching uncertainty. It's made me realize something. The place feels more like home with you there. Not just because of your help with the accounts or the cooking, but because of you, your presence, your perspective. Zara's heart quickened as she began to understand where this conversation was heading. Zeke, I'm not asking for immediate answers, he continued. I know you've got this new venture to focus on and your own path to determine, but I wanted you to know that when you're considering your future options, my door, my home remains open to you. Not just as a temporary shelter, but as a place you might choose to help build. With me. The proposal, for that's what it was beneath the careful phrasing, took Zara's breath away. Not because it was unexpected, there had been a growing connection between them that neither had fully acknowledged, but because of what it represented. Not rescue or charity, but partnership. Not escape from her past, but incorporation of it into a future of her own choosing. I don't know what to say, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. You don't need to say anything now, Zeke assured her. Just consider it as one possibility among many. Before she could respond further, they were interrupted by the arrival of their partners in the community exchange venture, Mrs. Peterson, Mr. Weber, Tom Miller, and several others who had committed to the project. The moment for private conversation passed as plans were discussed, timelines established, and responsibilities assigned. But throughout the practical discussions that followed, Zara found her thoughts returning to Zeke's words. And to the future they suggested not just a business of her own, but a home, a partnership, a life built on mutual respect and shared purpose. For a woman who had spent 14 years serving drinks and deflecting propositions, it was almost too much to comprehend this offering of genuine respect and affection, with no strings attached and no expectations beyond what she freely chose to give. As the group dispersed and she prepared to return to the ranch with Zeke, Zara made a decision. The details would need to be worked out, the practicalities addressed, but in her heart, she knew which path she wanted to explore, one that included both the community exchange and the quiet rancher who had seen in her not what she had been, but what she could become. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Construction began on the community exchange, with volunteers from throughout Jordan Valley contributing labor and materials. Zeke provided lumber from his land, while the Millers and other farmers donated time between their spring planting. Even Sheriff Davis and Judge Harmon made appearances, the latter rolling up his sleeves to help lay the foundation for the new building. Holloway, true to form, attempted to disrupt their progress. Suppliers mysteriously backed out of agreements, bank loans became unexpectedly complicated, and rumors circulated questioning the viability of a business run by a former saloon girl and her misguided partners. But for every obstacle Holloway created, the community found a solution. When the lumber supplier from the next town suddenly doubled his prices, farmers from outlying areas offered trees from their own lands. When the bank became hesitant about a loan, Judge Harmon stepped in as a personal guarantor. And when rumors threatened Zara's reputation, Mrs. Peterson and other respected townswomen publicly declared their support for her character and vision. Through it all, Zara's relationship with Zeke deepened. Their partnership in the community exchange project revealed complementary strengths: her head for numbers and organization, balancing his practical knowledge of construction and materials. In the evenings at the ranch, they shared meals and conversations that ranged from childhood memories to dreams for the future. Zara continued to sleep in the spare room, maintaining propriety despite the growing affection between them. Zeke, true to his word, never pressured her for more than she was ready to give, though his feelings were evident in 100 small gestures, a hand at her elbow when they walked together, a special dish prepared when she was tired from a day in town, the way his eyes sought hers across a crowded room. One evening, about a month after construction began, they sat on the porch watching a spectacular sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. The ranch was taking shape around them, fields planted with wheat and corn, a small herd of cattle grazing in the distance, chickens clucking contentedly in their coop. The exchange should be ready to open by midsummer, Zara observed, sipping tea from a porcelain cup that had been a gift from Mrs. Peterson. Faster than we expected. Many hands make light work, Zeke replied, and motivation makes those hands work harder. Motivation, the desire to show Holloway that intimidation doesn't work, Zeke explained, to prove that this community can chart its own course. Zara nodded thoughtfully. It's more than that, though. I think people are hungry for something different, a place that brings them together rather than dividing them. The saloon served its purpose, but it was limited in who it could welcome. Whereas the exchange will be open to everyone, men, women, families, even the Chinese farmers who have been kept at the margins. Zeke smiled. It's a powerful vision, Zara. One that's already changing how people see themselves and their town. And you, she asked softly. Has it changed how you see your place here? Zeke turned to look at her directly, his gray eyes serious in the fading light. When I bought this land, I thought I was just building a ranch, a business, a livelihood, but now I see it's about more than that. It's about being part of something larger, contributing to a community that stands for certain values. And are you satisfied with that? Zara pressed, her heart beating faster. Just contributing, understanding dawned in Zeke's expression. If you're asking whether the ranch is enough for me without, he hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Without someone to share it with, then no, it's not enough, it never would be. Zara set down her teacup, gathering her courage. I've been thinking about your proposal. The one you made the day we confronted Holloway. And, Zeke's voice was steady, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the hope he was trying to contain. And I've realized something important, Zara continued. All my life, I've been reacting to circumstances, making the best of situations I didn't choose. Even with the exchange, I'm building something from the ashes of disaster rather than truly choosing my own path. Zeke's face fell slightly, misinterpreting her meaning. I understand. You need to make your own way independent of anyone else's expectations. That's not what I meant, Zara said quickly, reaching for his hand. What I'm trying to say is that for once, I want to make a choice that isn't about necessity or practicality. I want to choose someone simply because it brings me joy, because it feels right in my heart, not just my head. Hope rekindled in Zeke's eyes. And what does your heart tell you, Zara? That I've never known a man like you before, she replied honestly. Someone who sees me clearly and values me completely, someone who offers partnership rather than possession, someone I could build a life with day by day, choice by choice. Zeke's hand tightened around hers. Are you saying yes to my proposal? I'm saying yes to exploring what we could be together, Zara clarified. I'm saying that when I think about my future, I want you to be part of it, here on this ranch and in town at the exchange, both aspects of a life we could share. The joy that spread across Zeke's face made him look younger, less weathered by years of hard work and solitude. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle kiss there first. It was a simple gesture, chaste by most standards, but it sealed a promise between them more meaningful than passionate declarations or elaborate ceremonies. When they parted, both were smiling, a little shy but certain in their choice. We'll need to be married before the town gossip gets too wild, Zeke observed practically. Propriety may be a bit much after all that's happened, but still. Yes, Zara agreed, thinking of the example they would set for the community they were helping to reshape. Perhaps a simple ceremony once the exchange is completed. It could be our first official event in the new building. A symbol of new beginnings, Zeke nodded, for us and for Jordan Valley. As darkness fell around them and stars emerged in the clear spring sky, they sat hand in hand, planning a future neither had imagined possible just months before. There would be challenges ahead, Holloway's continued opposition, the demands of both ranch and business, the inevitable adjustments of two independent people learning to build a life together. But in that moment, on a porch he had rebuilt with his own hands, beside a woman who had found the courage to reach for a different life, Zeke Xavier felt a contentment that had eluded him throughout years of wandering. And Zara, who had spent so long serving others' needs and desires, finally glimpsed a future shaped by her own choices, a future bright with promise and partnership. The Jordan Valley Community Exchange opened on a perfect July day, exactly 2 months after construction had begun. The building stood proud on the site where the Gilded Lily had once been, its fresh white paint and green trim presenting a welcoming face to the town. Wide windows allowed sunlight to stream onto polished wooden floors, and a covered porch with benches invited passers-by to rest and converse. Inside, the space was divided into practical but harmonious sections. Mr. Weber's expanded dry goods store occupied one wing, while Mrs. Peterson's cafe filled another with the enticing aromas of fresh bread and apple pie. The central area housed a large communal table for meetings and a small lending library of books donated by townspeople. A notice board near the entrance advertised community events, items for sale or trade, and services offered. The grand opening coincided with Zara and Zeke's wedding, a deliberate choice that linked their personal commitment to their investment in the town's future. Judge Harmon performed the ceremony on the exchange's front porch, with nearly the entire population of Jordan Valley in attendance. Zara wore a simple dress of ivory silk, her chestnut hair adorned with wildflowers gathered that morning from the meadows near the ranch. At 32, she was older than most brides, but as Mrs. Peterson remarked to anyone who would listen, "She's all the more radiant for knowing exactly what she wants." Zeke, standing tall and proud in a new suit, watched his bride approach with wonder in his eyes. 6 months ago, he had arrived in Jordan Valley a stranger, seeking only land and independence. Now he found himself at the heart of a community, pledging his life to a woman whose courage and vision had transformed not just her own circumstances, but the town itself. "Dearly beloved," Judge Harmon began, his deep voice carrying across the hushed gathering, "we are assembled here today to witness the union of two lives that exemplify the very best of what our community can be: resilience in the face of adversity, vision when others see only obstacles, and the courage to build something new on the foundation of mutual respect." The ceremony was brief but meaningful, the traditional vows spoken with genuine conviction by both bride and groom. When Zeke placed a simple gold band on Zara's finger, purchased with proceeds from his first modest cattle sale, tears glistened in her eyes, not of sorrow for the past, but of gratitude for the present and hope for the future. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Judge Harmon declared. "What has been joined together in trust and love, let no one tear asunder." As Zeke leaned down to kiss his bride, a cheer erupted from the assembled townsfolk, a spontaneous expression of approval and celebration. Even Sheriff Davis, standing at the edge of the crowd, allowed himself a rare smile of satisfaction. Only one face in the crowd remained: grim Emmett Holloway, watching from across the street, his expression a mixture of anger and calculation. Though his attempts to prevent the exchange from opening had failed, few doubted that his opposition would continue. Yet even Holloway seemed to recognize that this day, at least, belonged to Zara and Zeke, and to the new vision of Jordan Valley they represented. The celebration continued well into the evening, with music provided by the former piano player from the Gilded Lily and food contributed by households throughout the town. Lillian and Ruby had returned from Portland for the occasion, the former with tales of success at the millinery, the latter engaged to a respectable young clerk she had met there. "You've started something remarkable here, Zara," Ruby said as they embraced. "When I left, I thought I had to escape Jordan Valley to find a better life. Now I see that better lives can be built wherever people have the courage to imagine them." As twilight deepened and the party showed no signs of waning, Zeke found his bride surrounded by well-wishers and gently extracted her with a whispered, "Time to go home." Zara nodded, a mixture of exhaustion and contentment evident in her smile. They slipped away quietly, leaving the townspeople to continue the celebration that had become as much about Jordan Valley's new direction as about their marriage. The ranch welcomed them with golden lamplight in the windows, courtesy of Mrs. Peterson, who had gone ahead to prepare the house for their return. Flowers adorned the porch rails, and a small wedding supper waited on the kitchen table, though neither was particularly hungry after the feast in town. "Welcome home, Mrs. Xavier," Zeke said as he carried her across the threshold, a traditional gesture that made Zara laugh with unexpected delight. "Home," she repeated, savoring the word as he set her down gently in the front room. "It still seems almost impossible, all that's happened." "Which part?" Zeke asked, removing his suit jacket and loosening his tie. "The saloon burning down, the community rallying to build the exchange, or you agreeing to marry a dusty rancher with grand ideas." "All of it," Zara replied honestly. 6 months ago, I was serving whiskey and wondering if I'd ever save enough to escape that life. Now I'm co-owner of a thriving new business, respected by people who once looked down on me, and married to a man who—" She hesitated, emotion threatening to overcome her composure. "Who what?" Zeke prompted gently, moving to stand before her. "Who sees me," Zara finished simply. "Who knows my past and values my future, who offers partnership rather than protection or possession." She reached up to touch his face, tracing the line of his jaw with tender fingers. "Who loves me as I am, not as someone he wishes me to be." "I do love you, Zara Xavier," Zeke affirmed, covering her hand with his own. "More than I thought possible when I rode into Jordan Valley looking only for land to call my own." Their kiss was different from the chaste one they had shared at the ceremony, deeper, more intimate, a promise of the night to come. Yet even as passion kindled between them, there remained a fundamental respect, a recognition of each other as equal partners in this new journey they had begun. Later, as moonlight streamed through the bedroom window, Zara lay in the circle of her husband's arms, contemplating the extraordinary path that had led her to this moment. From a desperate young woman forced into a compromising profession, to a respected businesswoman and wife, her transformation seemed almost unbelievable. Yet it had happened step by step, choice by choice, with courage and determination that she hadn't known she possessed until circumstances demanded it. And beside her through the most critical steps had been this man, this partner who had offered not rescue but respect, not charity but choice. "What are you thinking about so intently?" Zeke murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "How different life can be when you're not alone," Zara replied truthfully. "When you have someone who stands with you, who believes in you even when you doubt yourself." "You would have found your way regardless," Zeke said, his faith in her evident even now. "You're the strongest person I know, Zara. I didn't give you that strength, I just recognized it." "Perhaps," she acknowledged, "but it's easier to be brave when someone has your back." She turned in his arms to face him fully. "Thank you for that, for everything." "No thanks needed between partners," Zeke replied, kissing her forehead gently. "Just promise me something, anything. Promise me we'll build this life together day by day, decision by decision. That we'll face whatever comes good or bad, triumph or challenge as a team, that neither of us will ever have to stand alone again." "I promise," Zara whispered, sealing the vow with a kiss that spoke more eloquently than words ever could. Outside their window, Jordan Valley lay peaceful under the summer stars, a community beginning to redefine itself beyond the shadow of a single man's influence. And within the walls of a ranch house once abandoned, but now reclaimed, two people who had found each other against all odds embraced a future limited only by the scope of their shared dreams. 5 years later, the autumn sun cast a golden glow over Jordan Valley, as Zara Xavier stood on the porch of the community exchange, watching her husband approach on horseback. At 37, she had settled into a confidence that made her more beautiful than she had been in her youth, lines of experience at the corners of her eyes only adding character to a face animated by intelligence and purpose. "Mama, Papa's home." 4-year-old Catherine exclaimed, abandoning her doll on the porch swing and racing down the steps as fast as her little legs would carry her. Zeke dismounted in time to catch his daughter in a sweeping embrace, lifting her high as she squealed with delight. "There's my Kathy girl," he laughed, settling her on his hip with practiced ease. "Have you been helping your mama at the exchange?" "I counted all the pennies," Catherine replied seriously, "and I didn't lose any." "She's a natural with numbers," Zara confirmed as Zeke climbed the steps to greet her with a kiss. "Just like her father." "Her mother more like," Zeke corrected, still marveling at his wife's head for business after 5 years of marriage. Under Zara's management, the community exchange had expanded twice, adding a proper bank that offered fair loans to farmers regardless of their social standing, and a small medical clinic staffed by a young doctor from Boston who had been seeking a place to establish his practice. "How was the cattle auction?" Zara asked, leading the way inside where refreshments waited. The autumn sales were critical to their ranch's profitability, determining much of their income for the coming year. "Better than expected," Zeke replied, setting Catherine down so she could run to the toy chest kept specially for her in the corner of the exchange's main room. "Prices are up and our stock showed well. We'll be comfortable this winter with enough to invest in those breeding bulls I've been wanting." Their partnership had proven as successful in business as in marriage. Zeke's practical knowledge of ranching combined with Zara's financial acumen had turned the once derelict Jenkins place into one of the most prosperous operations in the county. Meanwhile, the exchange had become the heart of Jordan Valley, a gathering place that embodied the inclusive vision they had first articulated 5 years earlier. "Mrs. Peterson left a pie for us," Zara mentioned, pouring coffee for them both. "Apple cinnamon, your favorite. At 70, Mrs." Peterson had retired from daily management of the cafe, though she still baked for special occasions and visited regularly to dote on Catherine, whom she considered a granddaughter in all but blood. "Any news from town while I was gone?" Zeke asked, savoring the strong coffee after a dusty ride. "Judge Harmon is retiring at the end of the month," Zara reported. "There's talk of Sheriff Davis running for his position with support from most of the county." "Davis would make a good judge," Zeke agreed. "He's proven his independence these past years." Indeed, much had changed in Jordan Valley's power dynamics. Emmett Holloway remained wealthy and influential, but his once unchallenged authority had gradually eroded as more citizens found their voices and claimed their rights. The turning point had come 3 years earlier, when Holloway's attempts to monopolize water access had been thwarted by a coalition of small farmers led by Tom Miller, with legal support from Judge Harmon and practical backing from Zeke's ranch. The defeat had tempered Holloway's more aggressive tendencies, forcing him to work within the community rather than attempting to dominate it outright. He and Zeke maintained a cool but civil relationship, bound by mutual interests in the county's economic development, if not by personal affinity. "Lillian wrote from Portland," Zara continued, referring to her former colleague from the Gilded Lily. "Her millinery business is thriving and she's considering opening a second location in Salem." "Good for her," Zeke said sincerely. "She always had an eye for style." She also mentioned that Ruby is expecting her second child in the spring. Zara's tone was light, but Zeke caught the wistful note beneath it. They had hoped for more children after Catherine, but nature had not cooperated. Though they rarely spoke of it directly, both felt the absence of the larger family they had envisioned. "Perhaps we should consider what we discussed last month," Zeke suggested carefully. "The orphanage in Portland still has children needing homes." "We have plenty of room and Catherine would love siblings." Zara's expression softened. "I've been thinking about that too, especially the older children who have less chance of being adopted. We could offer them a good life here." "We could," Zeke agreed. "A family isn't just about blood, after all. It's about love and commitment, something we know a thing or two about." Their eyes met in perfect understanding, one of countless such moments accumulated over 5 years of partnership. They had learned to communicate in half-spoken thoughts, in glances and subtle gestures that outsiders rarely noticed, but that formed the foundation of their deep connection. "I'll write to the orphanage director tomorrow," Zara decided. "Perhaps we could visit before winter makes travel difficult." The sound of the exchange door opening interrupted their conversation. Lin Y entered, carrying a basket of late vegetables from his thriving farm. Now a respected community member and one of the exchange's founding investors, he bowed slightly in greeting. "Mr. Xavier, welcome back," he said, his English much improved after years of regular commerce in town. "I bring special sweet potatoes for Mrs. Xavier as promised. Just in time for our harvest dinner," Zara exclaimed, rising to accept the gift. "You'll join us this Sunday, won't you, Mr. Lin? You and your family." The harvest dinner had become an annual tradition at the Xavier Ranch, a celebration that brought together people from throughout Jordan Valley, regardless of background or social standing. What had begun as a small gathering of those who had supported the exchange now included nearly half the town's population, with tables set up in the barnyard and food contributed by households of every description. "We would be honored," Lin replied. "My wife makes special dumplings to bring." After Lin departed, Zeke helped Zara close the exchange for the day. Catherine, assisted by arranging pencils in neat rows and watering the plants in the window tasks created specifically to make her feel included in her parents' work. As they prepared to return to the ranch, Sheriff Davis appeared, his expression unusually serious. "Glad I caught you both," he said, declining Zara's offer of coffee. "There's something you should know before you hear it elsewhere. Emmett Holloway had a stroke this morning," Zara gasped. Despite their history with Holloway, the news was shocking. The man had seemed indestructible, a force of nature rather than a mortal human being. "How serious?" Zeke asked. "Serious enough," Davis replied grimly. "Doc Thompson doesn't think he'll recover fully, if at all. His son's been telegraphed to come home from San Francisco." Holloway's only child, James, had left Jordan Valley years earlier after a bitter disagreement with his father. Their estrangement was common knowledge, though the exact nature of their quarrel remained private. "Is there anything we can do?" Zara asked, her natural compassion overriding old resentments. Davis shook his head. "Not at present, but there might be complications ahead. James Holloway doesn't share his father's attachment to Jordan Valley if he inherits everything." The implication was clear. The younger Holloway might choose to sell his father's extensive holdings, potentially disrupting the delicate balance that had been established in the community. "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it," Zeke decided. "For now, please convey our sincere wishes for Holloway's recovery, Sheriff. Whatever our past differences, no one deserves such a fate." After Davis left, Zara and Zeke loaded Catherine and their purchases into the wagon for the journey home. The road to their ranch was well maintained now, lined with prosperous farms and dotted with new homesteads established as Jordan Valley had grown. "Strange to think how much Holloway's opposition shaped our lives," Zara mused as they traveled. "Without his attempts to control the town, we might never have built the exchange. Without the fire at the saloon, we might never have found each other," Zeke finished, understanding her train of thought perfectly. "Life takes unexpected turns, doesn't it?" "Indeed it does," Zara agreed, watching Catherine doze against her father's side, exhausted from her day of helping at the exchange. "But I wouldn't change a single step that led us here." The ranch came into view as they crested the final hill, a testament to 5 years of hard work and vision. The once dilapidated house now stood proud and welcoming, surrounded by well-tended gardens. The barn had been expanded twice to accommodate growing herds, and several outbuildings housed equipment and supplies for the thriving operation. But it was more than just a successful business. It was a home in the deepest sense, a place of safety, growth, and love. A place where a former saloon girl had discovered her true worth and a wandering rancher had found his true purpose. A place they had built together, choice by choice, day by day, just as they had promised on their wedding night. As Zeke helped his wife and daughter down from the wagon, the setting sun bathed everything in a warm, golden light that seemed to Zara a perfect metaphor for their life together, rich, nurturing, and full of promise even as day turned toward evening. "What shall we name the horse Papa says I can have for my birthday?" Catherine asked suddenly, apparently having only been pretending to sleep. Zeke laughed, swinging her onto his shoulders. "Your birthday is months away, Kathy girl, and I said we'd discuss a pony, not a horse." "A pony is a small horse," Catherine replied with the impeccable logic of a 4-year-old. "And I want to name him Star because he'll have a white star on his forehead." "You seem very certain about this star," Zara observed, amused by her daughter's determination. "I dreamed it," Catherine said confidently, "and Mrs. Peterson says good dreams come true if you believe in them enough." "Does she indeed?" Zeke exchanged a fond glance with his wife. "Well, Mrs. Peterson is a wise woman. Dreams do come true sometimes, especially the ones you're willing to work for." As they climbed the porch steps together, a family created not by convention but by choice, Zara reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. From a desperate young woman trapped in circumstances beyond her control, to a respected businesswoman, beloved wife, and mother, her path had been neither straight nor easy. But it had been hers, shaped by her courage, her determination, and ultimately, her willingness to accept the respect and love offered by a man who had seen her true worth when others saw only her profession. "I love you," she said softly to Zeke as Catherine raced ahead into the house, eager to check on her kitten. "Today and always." "And I love you," he replied, his storm-gray eyes as steady and true as they had been that first night in the saloon. "My partner, my heart, my home." Inside, lamps waited to be lit against the gathering dusk. A meal needed to be prepared, a child to be bathed and put to bed, plans to be made for the harvest dinner and the potential adoption of children who needed a family as much as Zara and Zeke needed to complete theirs. But for now, they stood together on the threshold of the home they had built, bound by love freely given and received, by respect earned and maintained, and by the shared conviction that the best dreams were those created together, day by day, choice by choice, with courage and commitment, and the unwavering belief that even the most unlikely beginnings could lead to the most beautiful endings. And in the end, that was the greatest gift Zeke Xavier had offered Zara Dawkins all those years ago in a smoky saloon, not rescue or redemption, but the chance to become fully herself, in a place where she was valued completely, by a man who understood that true love begins not with possession, but with profound and enduring respect.